Vedai Sangapadakramopanishade Gayantiyam Samagaha Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pasyandiyam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha. After a very long time, more than a month, we are now resuming our class on this Bhagavad Gita, the 18th chapter. We are discussing the 18th chapter before we finished almost a month ago. Now we are continuing. And I believe most of our listeners already know or aware that we are resuming the class. So we were discussing the 54th verse of the 18th chapter. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochadi na kamshadi samasarva sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhade param. So, who is a true devotee of God? This idea is discussed in this 54th and 55th verse. So, one important point mentioned is samasarveshu bhuteshu. A true devotee of God will have an equanimity of mind, is perfectly established in wisdom, serenity, equanimity of mind, not easily shattered or shaken or disturbed by what happens outside. At the same time, he experiences his identity with the all-pervading divine reality, Brahman. Again, he will be established in a state of perfect contentment, a kind of inner serenity and contentment. In fact, this contentment is one important sign of a true devotee of God, a true spiritual person. It doesn't mean that you don't aspire for anything, you don't have any desire for anything, you are not engaging in any activity, but rather you will be established in a kind of inner contentment that disturbances happening outside will not affect us. That's the only difference. You can find in the history of religions, some of these greatest religious teachers had to face a lot of problems, persecutions, frequently in crucifixion in the case of Christ, and many saints were persecuted and received only post-mortem recognition. And now the point is, they could withstand all these obstacles because they have a strong determination. In another context, in the 12th chapter, Lord Krishna says two interesting characteristics. Adveshta sarvabhudanam maitra karuna evaja nirmamo nirahangara samadukha sukhakshami. This is one important thing. I mean, you won't have any hatred, ill feeling or hostility towards anyone. And then sandushta sadatam yogi yadatma dhranisyaya in the 12th chapter. A strong determination and this inner serenity and contentment. In fact, that is a true sign of spirituality. And secondly, it all depends upon the God idea that we have in our mind. That is very important. The discussion is bhakti or devotion. But devotion to what kind of God? A God who is compassionate towards everybody in this world, who makes no distinction, who doesn't see any dividing line between those who follow him and those who follow God in a different way. Without seeing any distinction, a true idea, a true God is a God of everyone, even of those who don't believe in him. I am never tired of quoting a very important sentence from Vivekananda's complete works. It's a very eye-opening one, but I like that statement so often because it's so relevant to our times. He says, you live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you don't accept him. So, our life, our interaction with others, and our own inner contentment and serenity, and our broad-mindedness, compassion for others, and seeing everyone with the same eyes. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu. I mean, seeing the same reality in everyone and everything. Other people's joy becomes our joy, and their problems become our problems. This may not be possible in any of the traditional religious faith systems, where the books lay down a specific and only way of worshipping God. That's an important point. So, if we are sincere and pure and unselfish, then there's a direct hotline to spirituality. So when you talk about God and devotion, we should know in the broader sense. It means spirituality. Frequently, in Western social conditions, if you talk too much about God, you won't be very much liked, because God himself doesn't have a very good name in many societies. That's not because God is facing problem, but because our understanding of God is facing problem. So, God is one universal supreme reality. And to be a true devotee of God means to become a good human being. In essence, a being becoming a good human being, humanistic qualities, spiritual qualities. That is emphasized in this book. Now, in the next verse, which is a very well-known verse, it is very important from the standpoint of philosophy of devotion. It actually talks about two levels of devotion to God. So one is devotion as means, the other one devotion in its highest perfection. So when we perform different rituals, going to temples, churches, reading books, and performing rituals, for example, mostly, that's true, but that's only means. God becomes a reality in our life only when we feel the divine spark of God in all of us, in everyone, and also in our own inner being. So this evolution of devotion, that's a very famous verse, the 55th verse. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvadaha tato mam tattvato jnatva vishade tad anantaram. Literal translation is very simple. So often literal translation doesn't bring in entire philosophy. No translation can do full justice. After all, Gita is a small, tiny fragment of a much bigger literary classic, Mahabharata. So what this statement tells you is, through bhakti, through devotion, you know my true nature. Tattvataha abhijanati means you understand me in my true nature, through devotion. And that devotion has got two dimensions. In the Sanskrit technical language, it's called sadhya bhakti and sadhana bhakti. One is devotion that is natural when you are already established in it. The other one, devotion we are trying to practice. We are still struggling in our spiritual practice. And this has something to do with our own evolution, our ego, how we evolve our ego. There is a very powerful statement in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, with the Guru of Vivekananda, who is the founder of this organization. He founded this organization in 1900. So Sri Ramakrishna says, you cannot really root out ego at the beginning, but you can give your ego a good job. So very muscular man, a strong man, he'll be a problem for you. He's staying in neighborhood. Suppose he gets some good job that keeps him engaged all the time in some kind of physical activity, so that he will now have no time, no leisure to do anything else. So our ego should be given a good job, a good employment, a good distraction. So, for example, if somebody tells you, well, I will write a big book, I will be a big musician, I will become a big writer or an artist, a painter, that's one way of sublimating ego. If that person doesn't do anything and is very egoistic, it can be a big problem. But ego can be given a sublimation. Ego can evolve. Ego can get a promotion in our life. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I will be a devotee to the ego. Very egoistic. What's the force of ego? I am a devotee of God. I shall read a good book. I shall do some good things. I would speak. I'll be compassionate towards everyone. So I'm very egoistic. That ego will take you out of ego. So ego should be given some good activity, some good engagement. Suppose there is a muscular man, kind of a hooligan, who is a troublemaker in the locality. If that person is given the job of a policeman, he become a very effective policeman, because he may help us in reducing the trouble in the neighborhoods. Like that, our ego can be given a very wonderful job. And Sri Ramakrishna he uses very strong language in English languages. That's one of the very few occasions when Sri Ramakrishna, who did not know English language, he used some English language, he said, this rascal ego will be given a good job. It is very wonderful. This in mid-19th century, remember. So suppose the ego is a big nagging problem, you become egoistic. All right, I shall do some wonderful things. I am very proud of my ego. I shall... See, look at these great men, great patriots, great social reformers, great men who have done great things in this world. They were all actually sublimating their ego. You could be a man like Lincoln, for example. He has tremendous sense of pride, self-confidence. That's why he could do what he did, in fact. He stood for an ideal and he accomplished it and paid the ultimate price for that. Or Christ coming to the religious tradition of Western world. Do you think Christ had a weak ego? Christ had a very strong ego. That's why he did not listen to the pleadings of the Pharisees and Sadducees who criticized him. Finally, he was crucified. Otherwise, he could have easily withdrawn his statements and the king of Jews. He didn't withdraw that. They didn't want him to become a new god and bring in new religion. That's why the Orthodox people found fault with him. He could have easily withdrawn and completely obeyed their instructions. But he had a strong sense of ego, determination. That is, santustaka satatam yogi yatatma dridhanischeka. In the Gita, in the 13th verse of the 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga, that's a chapter entirely devoted to devotion. Means he should be contented, happy all the time, because you're proud, you're happy, because you're a devotee of God, you're happy, you're trying to live a good life, you're happy, you're trying to do something good that gives you kind of inner joy and contentment and happiness. Not the happiness of a worldly minded man who gets a lot of money, gets suddenly very happy. No. Different kind of higher happiness, serenity, inner peace and contentment, a sense of fulfillment. Santushtaha. So the word, so tushti means contentment. Santosh samyak means a preposition is used for that, to make it all comprehensive happiness, contentment, equanimity and joy, inner joy, inexplicable joy of being a devotee of God. And then Dridhanischeka means a man of strong will, man or woman of strong will. He won't compromise when it comes to his ideal. The Buddha had it, Shankaracharya had it, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had it, Vivekananda. All these great men, anyone you take, the great mystics, they were persecuted, they were actually flogged, they were chained, and they had to face a lot of ordeals. Still, they did not desert their path. And finally, many of them died and they got post-mortem recognition, canonization, sometimes 50 years, 100 years after their passing away. But during their lifetime, that's so much a strong determination. So, a devotee of God naturally should be a person of strong determination. And this determination is called the sublimation of ego. Promotion that you give to your own determination, your aspiration. Then what happens is, in course of time, that will take you beyond ego, beyond aspiration. So beyond the need for self-confidence. So that's why Lord Krishna says, Santushtaha sadatam yogi yadatma dridhaniseha mayyarpida mano buddhir yoma bhakta samepreha. Somebody who has given his entire heart to God is a person of strong determination, because he's promoting his ego, becomes a spiritual ego, not a material ego. Material ego is a burden, is a prison, is a bondage. It chains you, it binds you, it strangulates you, giving no freedom. But spiritual ego, spiritual self-confidence, spiritual determination takes you beyond all these worldly empirical things and makes you a great spiritual man, spiritual person. So in the 55th verse, Lord Krishna says, during the early part of our spiritual evolution, this sadhana bhakti. But bhakti is a means, sadhana means. You are still struggling to evolve, to progress, to grow further in spiritual life. One should have this strong sense of determination and self-confidence. And with that bhakti, which is strengthened by self-confidence, ma abhijanati, they will know me, they will reach me. Yavan yaschasmi tattutaka. And you understand me properly. Tatomam tattuto jnatva visadetat anantaram. Then what happens is, and afterwards you will come to know my true nature. So in other words, in these verses you find bhakti or devotion is described as a means for Advaitic realization. So, of course, this is a continuation of a class. We already had more than 170, 80 classes behind. We already explained this earlier. Advaita means you realize the truth that God is one impersonal, transcendental principle that is present everywhere, present in everything. It is omnipresent, it is immanent, also it is transcendental. That is Advaita philosophy. And bhakti or devotion is a means to attain this. But again, I mentioned earlier, when we talk about God, when we conceive a God, that God should be, the God ideal should be a humanistic, a spiritual, universal ideal. One of the biggest problems in the evolution of the idea of God is often anthropomorphism frequently created walls around religions. So what happened, my God is right and the other God is wrong. So you often find these differences. That's because we don't understand religion as spirituality. True religion is spirituality, nothing else. And spirituality means becoming a good human being. Becoming a good human being means being compassionate, being kind-hearted, broad-minded, and being kind to everyone. So, if you can think of religion as spirituality, then even atheists and agnostics can become spiritual. Buddha, often there is no better example in the history of religions. Buddha, one of the greatest names in the history of religions. We cannot think of a better human being in this world. Buddha. And he didn't accept a creator God. He did not reject, but he was not bothered about God. He thought better be a human being in this world when you are living. So this is the idea behind this idea. So tatomam tattuto jnatva visadetat anantaram. Now after this, the next one very important point, remember, is this bhakti or devotion in Indian philosophy, Indian theistic philosophy, especially the Vaishnava philosophy. It plays a very important role. What is bhakti? What is devotion? So there are two aspects. One, bhakti in its highest form, when you are already established in bhakti or devotion, where God has become a reality in your life. God is not something that you think of in the morning and evening, not somebody whom you pray to once a week, or some who read about, but God has become a reality in our everyday experience. That's the highest. Before reaching there, there are many areas, there are many things that we have to go through. So one of the greatest contributions to this devotion idea, this idea was given by the great Vaishnava philosopher Ramanuja. We already discussed this subject very elaborately in our Stanford classes. You can see almost 28 lectures on this philosophy of devotion by Ramanujacharya, which we normally give every Sunday at 6 p.m. In our series of classes on the foundational text of Indian philosophy that's addressed to the students of Hindu Student Association of Stanford. Now, there are some very important ideas related to this bhakti. According to this great philosopher, Ramanuja, well, if you want to see maybe a parallel figure in Western tradition, you can think of somebody like Spinoza and Aquinas combined into one. That's the position of Ramanuja. So Ramanuja developed a very unique concept of devotion. And he says, well, one can continue practicing different kinds of rituals. You can go to a temple, you can go to church, a synagogue or Buddhist place, anywhere you go regularly, pray, meditate, and then you can sing songs. This is wonderful. Now, at times what happens is, we are struggling, we are trying our best to practice this. But frequently, we come to a point where we feel we can't go beyond this. I mean, you feel you feel you have reached a dead wall. This happens to many serious spiritual seekers. We sincerely want to follow a religious tradition, a faith system, but then mind is not willing. And we make our best effort. You read books, you study about religion, you perform rituals, you perform all these external things. Still, you are not able to make much progress. We feel that we are not making much progress. So we have made our effort, but we feel that our effort is not enough to take us to the highest spiritual destination. Then what we can do, we can surrender ourselves. It's called self-surrender. Technically called Sharanagati or Prapatti in Ramanuja philosophy, which actually means we close the bargain. So we give the entire responsibility to higher power. When we do this in all sincerity, what happens is, suddenly we become tools in the hands of a higher power. And then slowly all these conflicts begin to vanish. All doubts begin to vanish. What happens is, when we are making our own effort without this self-surrender, we are relying upon our own resources, which is very good. It's important for us to depend upon our own resources. But there comes a time when we feel that our own resources are inadequate. You need some higher power to come to your rescue. And then you surrender yourself to God. And then you find these karmic blocks get slowly loosened, get dismantled. Karmic blocks are a term used, maybe now it's well understood in many books on psychology, even in Western world. So what it means is, we have a lot of tendencies, impressions, ideas, memories in our mental system, coming according to Vedanta and Buddhism from previous life cycles or from this life cycle. So what happens is, at some point, we feel we try to do our best, but something within us will not permit us to do what we want to do. You want to meditate, but somehow the mind is not willing to accept. You want to do something good, somehow mind suddenly creates an invisible stumbling block. This can sometimes happen. It can even manifest some kind of procrastination, which of course a psychological problem, not in its chronic sense, but in its early stages. This frequently happens to many spiritual seekers. When we try to postpone things and use as a pretext for not doing, we deceive ourselves. Because one part of our mind is willing, the other part of our mind is not willing to meditate or to do good things. So when this sort of conflicts come, in spite of our best efforts, we read books, we perform rituals, all these we become participants in the activities of the temple or a church or any spiritual institution. All that we can do, but in our own individual life, we are not able to meditate. Instead of reading some higher books, our mind goes to some trash. So, one part of the mind is friendly, the other part is very hostile. At that time, what we should do, we leave it to God. And this leaving to God, closing the bargain, taking refuge in a higher power is called prapatti in Ramanuja philosophy. So he wrote an independent book, a small book in prose, Sharanagati Gadyam, in which he describes this. So, of course, technically you find in the philosophy there are certain rules, which I don't want to elaborate because they are not relevant beyond the particular small community. But the idea that Ramanuja put forward is very, very important, very relevant and very universal, because it's so universal for any spiritual seeker. So he says, first of all, we must feel that our resources are inadequate. We feel that we are totally helpless. We are in the position of a destitute. We are not able to do what we want to do. We feel we are totally helpless. And out of this conviction of our own utter helplessness, we feel that God is only refuge. Now, those of you who are not familiar with Ramanuja philosophy can read not only Spinoza, but also, and much more prominently, you can read the autobiographical writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, where she keeps describing one after another all these ideas, how she is knocking at the door, but the door is not opening. She feels that it continues her spiritual journey. So inner castle, you can find going deeper and deeper, inner and inner into spiritual life. So Ramanuja says, it's a kind of hotline. When you have a hotline, you don't wait for too long, It's quick, it happens. But it should be straightforward and sincere. We cannot take refuge in God as a kind of excuse or a compromise or with this easy way. I won't pray, I will take refuge in Him. It cannot happen. We should have exhausted our own resources. We should have experienced the end of our own resources, the inadequacy of our own resources. Then only self-surrender becomes actually real and genuine. Examples are, of course, the story of Saint Francis of Assisi. I'm taking examples from Western Christian tradition, maybe more logical for many of the listeners. Or maybe Saint Augustine is an example, Saint Paul is an example. So, it also, this kind of prapatti or self-surrender always accompanied by a spiritual transformation. So, according to Ramanuja, the 66th verse that we are going to discuss in course of time, maybe after 3-4 sessions, the 66th verse of the 18th chapter, if you can read, you can take it. That is, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvabhabebhyo mokshayishyami masuja. Lord Krishna says, you give up all your efforts to practice karma yoga, bhakti yoga, all other rituals, spiritual disciplines. Then if you can't do that, if you are not able to practice them properly, you give yourself up to God's grace. And then you don't have to worry about anything. It is called prapatti or sharanagati. Now, this is a very interesting principle that Ramanuja brought out. And he says, for example, bhakti prapatti pramukham tat vashigara karanam. That means there are many books written on this subject. Rahasya Trayasara is by Vedanta Desika, one of the commentators on Ramanuja's literature. So Gita Bhashya and a commentary by Vedanta Desika you find. So what it means is, bhakti is the ultimate, this human endeavor. It is adopted for the awakening of divine grace. It is two categories, bhakti and prapatti. Bhakti is the means, prapatti is the last stage. One can reach prapatti through bhakti, or one may be ready for prapatti when a person has exhausted all his resources. When it's absolutely pure and ready and spiritually sincere, then this self-surrender becomes very simple and logical. This is a very interesting idea in Ramanuja's philosophy. Now, the next verse that we have to discuss is the Sarva karmani pisada kurvano mat vyapasreha mat prasadat avapnodi shashudam padamavayam. So, sarva karmani pisada, that means you just surrender all your actions and also their results to the Lord. And so actions and also their results, one should surrender to God. And then what happens is, then my grace will save you. My grace will take you to the highest spiritual destiny. This is a simple meaning. So this surrendering actions and the results is a very important idea here. What it means is, actions by themselves may not always be helpful or pleasant or happy. But many actions are unpleasant. There are many things that we would rather not do, but we had to do as a matter of obligation in our life. So, our actions by themselves either may produce happy results or unhappy results. If actions produce results beyond our expectations, we become happy. If it is below our expectations, we become unhappy. So but anyway, even if we get all the results that we aspire for, and if our actions produce more result, beyond our expectations, then we have a desire to continue doing the same work even if there is no need for it. And again, it happens all the time that we cannot expect a continuous succession of happy results. Some actions produce happy results, some actions produce unhappy results. So there's always this possibility, the uncertainty, always this possibility of actions producing unhappiness, maybe misery, or maybe even the opposite results, opposite from what we expect. And in that case, we become unhappy, we become distressed, we become disappointed. It leads to a lot of inner distress if the results are unhappy results. If they're happy results, then it helps us to do, it inspires us to do more of those things, even if there is no need for it. So actions always create likes and dislikes, prejudices, or maybe obsession for certain desires. Even if we don't need to do that, we want to do that because it produces a kind of external happiness or joy. In other words, actions bind us. Actions have a binding effect on us when we do things with a great expectation. So actions can often create a prison, and we get self-imprisoned within the walls of actions. Because actions are linked to likes and dislikes. Sometimes we like certain things, we dislike certain things. Now, here, suppose if we can do all our work, not only spiritual work, even secular work, cooking in the kitchen, teaching in a university, public administration, any work if we can do, without much selfish desire, not without enthusiasm, but without selfish, obsessive desire. Then what happens is those actions do not produce any likes and dislikes. They don't become a prison house. So actions can become a prison if we do actions with a strong sense of identity and likes and dislikes. Actions, on the other hand, help us to dismantle the karmic blocks. If we do everything to the best of our ability, but without any selfish motive. So that keeps our mind light. We are not burdened with anxiety and worry when we are doing things. We are not too much concerned. But we are not negligent. We are not indifferent. We are not inefficient. But at the same time, we can do with full application, with the full enthusiasm, but knowing fully well what everyone knows, but frequently forgets. What is that principle? Always, we cannot expect all actions to be always successful. Sometimes actions can be even failure also. That possibility, if you can keep in mind, we can do things without being affected. So, sarva karmanyapi sada kurvano mad vipasreha. One of the greatest men the world has ever produced to practice this science of unselfish action was Buddha, who did not believe or affirm in a anthropomorphic creator God. But he never did anything for himself. So you can look at Buddha's picture. There is no misery. I mean, he is enjoying something in his inner serenity. I am giving Buddha's example because primarily it shows that you'll be able to be spiritual even without being religious. So spirituality essentially means becoming a good human being. But belief in God, belief in a compassionate God, belief in Vedantic tradition, our idea of God is the God of everyone, including agnostics and atheists. That's why, according to Vedanta, ekam sat vipra bhagavata vadanti. There cannot be any wrong religion. So many religions are equally valid paths leading to the same goal. Different names of gods are so many names that we use to define or to understand the one supreme reality, which is looked upon in so many different ways, in so many different traditions. So, if we can think of that and dedicate all our actions, then what happens? Our mind becomes happy, serene. And that itself can be like a road that is sure to take us to our spiritual destination. According to Vedanta, that's how we enter spiritual life. It's just like boarding a running train. If you board a train that is running, you are sure, of course, it should not be running too fast, but a train that is sure, that is destined to take you to the destination, karma yoga. So, unselfishness, dedication, and doing our duty with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, dedicating actions and the result to God. That is sure to take us to the highest spiritual destination. So, sarva karmani visa kurvano mad vyapaseha. Those who dedicate all their actions to God without ever thinking about the results, they will get my grace. These words come from Lord Krishna, and they will reach the highest spiritual destination. So karma yoga becomes a means, a road that takes us to the destination, to our destination. Once you enter the freeway, there's a main road, you cannot help reaching the destination because everything is clear. But if you drive high lane, by lane, some maybe narrow roads around, you may reach your destination, but it may take a long time. But karma yoga, which means unselfishness and dedication to what we do. Not only spiritual rituals, but any action. Every action can be done in a spiritual manner. There is no such thing as secular spiritual equation. Everything can be done in a spiritual manner. That will take us to the highest spiritual destination. That's the great idea in the 56th verse. Now you can have interaction, and those who have got doubts, any question you want to discuss, you are most welcome. Thank you.
Swamiji, I noticed in the Gita that I know that the 18th chapter is like a summary of entire Gita. Second chapter is also a summary. Even if I exclude that, there is a lot of repetition of the same concepts, like doing actions without selfishness, equanimity of mind, the highest knowledge and devotion are the same thing. Why so much repetition compared to other spiritual literature?
Gita is a dialogue, a conversation between two individuals. It is not well-programmed, well-prepared text or a book. It is an informal conversation. Arjuna asked questions. You'll be surprised. Some of the questions that Arjuna asked in the 18th chapter makes it very clear that he had not fully understood whatever Krishna had taught in all the 17 chapters. So there are repetitions. Again, karma has got so many dimensions. This is a very clear-cut concept of karma as it evolves in our life. For example, the lowest and the most undesirable attitude towards karma is doing nothing, laziness, procrastination. Full of desire, you have plenty of desire, you want to become a rich man, you want to enjoy many things, you are not a saint, you are not a Buddha, you are not a man of renunciation, but you are not willing to do anything. And that is the most despicable, the most degraded state, the most negative approach to karma as such. So the first task before Krishna was to tell Arjuna, you're talking like a Buddha, you're talking words of renunciation. You are not ready for it. If you want to enjoy this world, you work hard. That is true. Even if somebody asks you, what should I do? You should not ask him to practice karma yoga. What he should do, suppose he's a student or a professional, you work sincerely with all your efforts, do well in your examination, do well in your job, try to get some high grade. That's a natural aspiration of every human being. Sakama karma. That's step number one. Second step is this. Well, suppose you work very hard with a lot of determination, lot of aspirations, desire. You want to enjoy, you want to become wonderful. And then you find you have become yourself very, very successful in whatever job you have undertaken. But then you don't feel inner joy. You feel something is incomplete, something is wanting. You are not able to sleep every day without taking sleeping pills. You life something wanting. You can see. See, today if you look at today's world population, there are of course places where people are still very poor. But you find about 60% of maybe 65% of the world population may have already got everything that they want, all the primary needs they want, food, shelter, everything. And at least some 20, maybe 20%, 15% have got more than what they want, what they need. They are not happy. They are not happy. So that means the richest man, the wealthiest man, the most accomplished man, the most successful man in terms of modern businessman, he is not very happy. Something is wanting. That's because he is doing everything with a great aspiration, with a great selfishness, desire. So what happens? Desire never comes to an end. Desire, like a river that flows, it never stops. So you need something more than success. So what happens? So you do karma, do a karma yoga. When you practice yoga, what happens is, you work hard for your job, for your happiness, for your success, but you also realize that success in empirical life, worldly life, is not enough. That will not bring lasting peace. You need more than that. So then only you resort to karma yoga. So bring yoga with karma. You join together, karma and yoga. Yoga means, literally yoga means realizing the limitations of karma. Karma can bring you great success, but karma cannot bring something spiritual, something lasting, everlasting. Yoga brings that. So, first stage is Sagama karma, means action with desire. You have laziness, do your duty with all application and enthusiasm. Then karma yoga, do everything without a selfish motive. And being established in that. So there are different levels of karma. So there are places where Krishna says, don't teach him karma yoga. The buddhivedam janayeda jnanam karma sankinam. Krishna tells you. It's very interesting. Suppose a student is working hard for getting a high grade. His life success depends upon his getting a high grade. And you tell him, you study, you have no selfish motive. A student is not ready for it. You should tell him, you should make him work hard for getting a high grade. And later on, when he became a billionaire, you can say, now you should give up all desire. So, it depends upon where you stand. That's the idea. So, what aspect of karma you take depends upon where you stand, to what level you have progressed, and what aspect of karma you need depends upon our own spiritual progress. Okay, thank you. So, we had to discontinue this class for the last almost 1.5 months. We are resuming the class. You are most welcome. And whenever you have any doubt, you can always monitor the website, vedanta.org. Any doubt, anything to ask? You are most welcome. Please come.
Hello, Swamiji. Thank you for the lecture. You were talking about the importance of having strong determination and inner serenity and contentment. And you mentioned the word santosha, and I know that's in the Yoga Sutras. And I was thinking about, I've been thinking a lot about the Brahma Viharas recently, the Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about that, about maybe how the Brahma Viharas relate with this idea of inner contentment, but also, as you mentioned, like with karma yoga and stuff.
Yeah. So, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. It comes in the Yoga Sutras, and also it comes in many other contexts also. Gita also in a different way it comes. So these are 4 different attitudes to people whom you may confront in your daily life. People who are friendly, you should be friendly with them. People who want to live a spiritual life but not able to do, you should be sympathetic. Those who are more advanced, some of them, then you should be happy about it. There are people whose words, whose association can pour cold water in whatever path you are taking. Keep a long distance from it. So now, to be able to practice karma yoga, you need this approach. Because frequently, we read books and we come across people who may tell us things that may not be helpful to us. So, if you really practice karma yoga, we develop a kind of inner wisdom, and our mind will be automatically able to respond properly, to react properly to various situations involving different kinds of people. So karma yoga is the surest means to begin our spiritual journey. And spirituality in its early stage, it manifests as simple common sense. This is not often understood properly. Swami Tattwamayananda wrote a very big volume, Meditation and Spiritual Practice. And he worked in the US during the pre-war days, early 30s, 1920s. He worked in Philadelphia, other places. Then he traveled in Europe during the early years of Second World War. Then he left for India. Now, he had to talk to a number of people who are not familiar with Sanskrit language. That was a time when Jung and Adler were becoming more and more popular. They started influencing the intelligentsia of European world. So in his book, he had to tell people what's the use of spirituality. For religion was getting a very bad name at that time. The report the Catholic Church was supporting Hitler. being a big amount is supporting him. So lot of problems in the world of religion and spirituality. So Swami Tattwamayananda, in one of his question and answer sessions, he said, spirituality is nothing but humanism and common sense. Spirituality is something very abstract, very difficult to understand what spirituality is. It's a word. Sometimes you may think going to a temple or a church and practice some rituals can be spirituality. But obviously if you listen to today's social media or internet, you know very well that religions cannot be always so wonderful as religion as being understood and practiced, and it becomes a slogan. So then what is spirituality? Spirituality is okay, that's what we need. That should be the essence of true religion, true religious practices. So he says, true spirituality is humanism and simple common sense. You develop a very mature attitude and perspective towards life, to other people around, towards everything, and also basically you become a good human being. Whatever that means, whatever that takes, becoming a good human being. You add a number of adjectives: compassionate, kind-hearted, understanding, that's all. So if you talk about religion and then you don't display, you don't manifest these qualities, humanism and kindness, then that's not religion. That's religion minus spirituality. So what I'm talking about, the reason why I'm giving this example is, so many great masters in those days, during pre-Second World War time, they were asking questions about religion. So that's how this idea, well, I'm spiritual, not religious, this actually originated during the pre-war time, pre-Second World War time, 1930s and late 1920s. I don't need religion, I don't need God, I want to be spiritual. And there is a time when Buddhism also started influencing Western world. After Vietnam War, it became much more of an avalanche. So what it means is, essentially what Lord Krishna is talking about is, when you are a devotee of God, you can become a good human being. And the first step is, do whatever you do with unselfishness. Because unselfishness is the most visible expression of spirituality. If you're unselfish, it is impossible to be unselfish without spirituality. A mother's love for her child, or children's love for their parents, for example. These are all examples of pure unselfishness. And these are expressions of pure spirituality. Vivekananda also mentioned the essence of spirituality is unselfishness. And that's why action with unselfishness is the kindergarten of spiritual life. And when you're in the university, then also you get established in action and unselfishness. There are other things you may believe in, Advaita, Visitadvaita. These are great spiritual philosophical systems, concepts that explain different aspects of spirituality. But if you want to see spirituality in a visible form, humanism and unselfishness it's expressed in action. Karma Yoga and humanism. That's what Swami Tattwamayananda mentioned. Many other ideas you find. Okay? Thank you, thank you. So we'll continue our discussion in next week. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.